Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to a bit of a shorter format for our webinars today as we host a lunch and learn, a deep dive into Pion's new pulse data over the next half an hour. I'm Richard Jackson and I head up the events and insights here at Pion.
And yeah, I oversee primary research at Pion, investigating students and young people to help uncover trends, attitudes, buying behaviour and engagement with brands across the UK and globally.
Fantastic. And I hope you're all well. We've had a good start to the week. This will be a good end to a week. And as it's a lunch and learn, it would be odd of us to eat lunch during this. However, Leah, what's for your lunch afterwards? What's
I'm
the
going to
menu?
have a hamburger. What about you, Rick?
Okay, sounds good. Bit of a cheese sandwich. But I hope you've all got your lunch to hand over the next half an hour. So today we're going to be turning a new page into our understanding of how we look at Gen Z and reintroduce to you and to us around what it means to actually be Gen Z. And the purpose of today's session is to highlight our new Pulse survey that Leah and the rest of the Insights team have been working on over the past 12 months. And this session will form part of a further series around the Pulse survey, which will also include a 1-hour deep dive at our YMS event in a couple of weeks, where we'll be exploring the data in much more detail. And it's designed to ensure that our Pion's clients, everyone here on this call and our prospects, receive valuable and relevant data that's most of all accurate and robust. It provides our internal teams with up-to-date insight into the changing habits of Gen Z and introduces our wider community as to how they also should be understanding Gen Z too. So we're going to look at the population as a whole and to see who are Gen Z today. Leah will look at dynamic influences, and then we've got some great key takeaways and some one-pagers for you to take away after this session also. So to kick things off, I think it'd be great to hear from you all at home or in your offices around when was the last time that you collected data to inform your Gen Z strategy. There should be a poll popping up. So by all means, let us know when was the last time you used data to inform your strategy. So do please let us know. It looks like quite a few of you are using it regularly, thank goodness, which is always good. But is it every week? Is it in monthly meetings to look over top level trends? Or is it less often and you need to get better than this? So do please let us know and we'll take a look at that data later. Fantastic. So diving in, Leah, over to you.
Perfect. So we conducted an online survey with 4,000 Gen Z in the UK. That consisted of 4 waves done each quarter of the past 12 months to track behaviours, attitudes and engagement with key sectors of Gen Z in the UK. Emerging trends were identified, allowing brands to keep their fingers on the pulse of Gen Z. The aim of the research is to understand nuances within this population and how using combined data sources can help make effective decisions to target this audience. Before we get into the results of the research, we want to start by taking a step back. What do we already know about Gen Z? This investigative approach of looking at data on a population helps us understand the size of this cohort and the number of people within this demographic, allowing us to have a laser focus on the research. So Rick, who are Gen Z?
Thanks so much. So we can see here that to kick off, overall, we've got 60 million people in the UK. And within that, we've got 13 million of these are Gen Z. So and within this 13 million, we've identified that 4.3 million of this cohort are currently in the workforce. So they're creating their own disposable income, independent purchasing habits, and they're creating their own view of the world. And then within this, we've also got 6.4 million under 18 who are emerging into the people that they will become tomorrow. And they're also influencing parents' shopping habits. They're developing their own personalities, something that Leah will talk about shortly, and very much discovering the world. So already we've seen just from this very top level data that we've got 2 very separate cohorts of young people that all need to be spoken to and talked to and advertised to and marketed to in very different ways. Leah.
Yeah, so based on the population data, we can get an understanding of the diversity within this cohort. So this allows us to understand that not all of Gen Z will be engaging with a given sector or brand at all at once. We need research to uncover who within Gen Z are most aligned with our brand. And that's where primary research comes in to understand who is engaging. Using the population data on Gen Z alone to drive decisions could skew the strategy away from our target audience and more towards the wider population. So how do we go about understanding our audience? Rick, if we move to the next slide. So we use demographics, psychographics, and sociographics. So we would start by doing some research to simplify and ensure we capture what we need. Having this focus on demographics, psychographics, and sociographics can help us understand key drivers of behaviour and segments of either the population or our customers. So demographics, a little bit like the data we've just discussed at the beginning of the presentation, it showed the number in millions of people in the UK, in Gen Z, in employment under the age of 18. This is demographic data and it's usually available through the ONS, and is a good place to start when looking to investigate our target customers. Then you can delve into things like age and income and employment in the research should you wish to cut the data to understand those influences on people within those groups. And we have psychographics and sociographics. Both are similar, and these will capture things such as personality, social class, politics, how they're influencing Gen Z, and how they're engaging with your brand. Again, you can cut the data by psychographics or sociographics to help curate customer personas and segments. As they say on TV, here's one we made earlier, we use demographic, psychographic, and sociographic to cut our most recent wave of our pulse into some mini personas that Rick is going to talk us through.
Cheers, Leah. So yeah, these three pillars, demographics, psychographics, and sociographics. And as Leah mentioned, we've used these to identify a number of different personas to hopefully shape your work, your messaging, and our work also here at Pion. So from looking at demographics, psychographics, and sociographics, the pulse has identified a number of different areas. So looking at a generic Gen Z person, the customer, and a great name, the digital butterfly. So the generic Gen Z, in terms of demographic, is living in the southeast of England compared to the customer persona in London and the digital butterfly based in southeastern London. So their demographics where they live, their locations are very different, and ultimately giving them very different outlooks in the world in which they live in. Other demographics that we're going to be looking at is employment status. The generic profile is in education, plus as a student, whereas the digital butterfly is in full-time employment. So again, we now already have two very different profiles of spending habits, lifestyles, just based on demographics alone. If we then look at the psychographics, taking these into account, from personality-wise, our generic Gen Z is extroverted and optimistic. And we compare this to the digital butterfly, who leads on creativity and honesty. And then in terms of sociographics, our generic Gen Z has pressures of the current financial crisis and climate in which they're living in. And our customer persona has concerns over education and their future careers. So taking the differences of sociographics into account, we're talking about two very different mindsets of where they are in their lives right now, what they want to be experiencing in the world in which they live in. Both of value, but in very different places in the world in which they're living in, and they need to be spoken to in very different ways. Leah.
Yeah, so aside from understanding our customers, we need to understand the macro influences on them. So what's going on in the world that can impact the behaviours such as politics, brand announcements and publications, the economy, technological advancements and more. Not only do these help inform how customers engage with your brands, but they are dynamic, and it's important to know what's influencing consumer behaviour and when. Pairing this with what you already know about the population can help understand the direction of these trends and how frequently they happen and to what extent within Gen Z to help inform strategy. So let's take a look at some trends we've been tracking and what this means for the population and our segments. So with the general election being announced yesterday, it's timely to discuss how politics acts as a macro influence. And without getting into too much detail about what politicians have said that could be driving down the number of Gen Z looking to vote for the 4th of July, we only have half an hour. I do want to draw our minds back to March when the Prime Minister thought it would be fashionable to wear the Adidas Sambas. In relation to our graph, we can see that the likelihood to vote in the next election was 58% of Gen Z when he issued his public apology, almost 10% less than around a year ago when we started the pulse. We can also see that this trend has dropped over time and can infer that other key influences may have driven Gen Z away from the polling stations. During a time in politics, many might define as a critical time to engage with others. In the meantime, it will be interesting to see what the trend in sales Adidas has had in relation to our PM wearing those Adidas Sambas. Let's just say it looks like Be Real is about to be gone. This time last year, we would have been discussing how almost 1 in 3 Gen Z were using the platform, and now the statistic is more like 1 in 10. We could assume that Be Real isn't keeping up with the features and budgets of more popular platforms. For example, with TikTok and its introduction of TikTok Shop. I just bought 3 Lenore Unstoppable scent boosters, the large ones for £3, via there the other day. Or YouTube, who not only mixes long form and short form content, but live streams events such as large sporting events. One for you to ponder. What way do we think this trend is going to go if there's no intervention from the brand? Moving on to another macro influence to be mindful of is the announcements from brands themselves. So what we can see here is on April the 4th, Disney announced a crackdown on password sharing. We can see that this dip might be because of, what we've seen with Netflix, and where they've also announced the same thing in a bid to increase profits. One way Disney could try to win over Gen Z is to have different payment options, lowering the barrier for entry for those of our Gen Z who don't have as much disposable income. So just drawing our minds back to those segments and personas a little bit earlier on, the overall Gen Z, they only have a disposable income of around £100 a month. So they're going to be really frugal with where they choose to spend it. Moving on, Rick. As we saw in the news this week, inflation has dropped to around 2.3%. Wages are up, and this is also true for Gen Z. The number of Generation Z reporting that they have between 500 and 1,000 disposable income every month has increased, suggesting that more Gen Z have the disposable income to drive into the economy and, in our terms, spend with brands. However, again, there's other macro influences at play here, so being mindful of frugality or the instability of the economy, with interest rates still being held at 5.25%, there could be some reluctance to spend still. And so having discounts, offers and promotions could help drive Gen Z through the door.
Great, thanks, Leah. So as we close off this first section of discussing the pulse, by all means, any questions around the personas, the pulse itself, trackers, by all means, do please put them in the chat, and we'll get them in just a couple of minutes. But I think just some key takeaways to be really kicking off this new piece of work that we're doing here at Pion. First off, a single statistic doesn't paint a full picture of the population, as we discussed at the start of this session. A number of variables: culture, development, location, income, education status, social class, politics and economics. They can all influence purchasing behaviours. It's absolutely integral that we don't think of Gen Z as catch-all. And then thirdly, layering primary research, as Leah mentioned, with secondary may help give a more realistic picture of your audience and the shopper landscape with Gen Z. Leah, anything to add to that in terms of takeaways from how we kicked off this work today?
Yeah, I would just say final thoughts for me is to remember that the population isn't stagnant, it's dynamic, it's constantly changing and evolving, and it's important for us to know who Gen Z are and where to target them. Like we saw with Be Real, for example, what's happening in the UK might be different than in the US, where there's ongoing discussions around TikTok being banned. So ensuring that you ditch the blanket approach with Gen Z and tailor your marketing to them on a local and a global scale is key.
Awesome. Thank you. So we've got some questions coming in, and we've got some time in this lunch and learn to get them. So kicking things off, the first question coming in: if I wanted to set up my own Gen Z tracker, how would I go about setting this up? So Leah, a Gen Z tracker, how would they go about setting it up?
Yeah, so I would recommend definitely starting with broader statistics on the population and working your way down from there, sort of as a funnel approach, and then using demographics, psychographics, sociographics to guide those questions. You might need to segment your data at a later stage, and then from there go with your brand specific questions, sort of a good way to have a flow. So yeah.
Awesome. And obviously, I guess, get in touch with Pion as well to maybe discuss setting that up for sure. A question come in terms of the current pulse that we've run at the moment. I know we've done a number of waves currently across the past year. What's the most surprising stat that's come from the pulse over the last year? So Lee, I probably have to give you maybe a couple of seconds to dig into the vault of stats sitting in your head. But I guess anything that comes to mind that's been surprising that we've uncovered over the past year.
Do you know what? For me, I think the voting one was like a really strong one, just because I think a lot of people would assume that Gen Z would be the most proactive, the most progressive, the most likely to be voting, probably have, an overwhelming majority of Gen Z especially if you assume that will be reporting that they're going to vote. So I think that one is probably one of the most standout ones, although I appreciate that's a bit of a cop-out because we've just presented it. But yeah, there's lots of different stats that we've pulled from the pulse that we're going to delve deeper into across YMS and then some other webinars too.
Understand. Another question, how can I make sure that I'm targeting the right Gen Zers with my marketing? And how do I know what kind of Gen Zers will be interested in my brand? I think that maybe comes back to those 3 pillars that we spoke about, making sure they've got them spot on, but yeah.
I would probably just echo that. What you'd want to do is be looking at your own customers, or Gen Z. So for example, what we've just presented here is Gen Z as a whole. Who your customer base is are going to be very different to the general population. So you're going to want to segment your own customers and use that to drive any strategy, unless you are targeting outside of your customer base to get new business in. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. A very timely question. I think it's really the answer to this, but do we think the announcement of the general election yesterday, excuse me, could drive up the number of Gen Zers considering to vote?
I mean, that's such an interesting question, but what I would say is I think it's definitely one to watch. I think it's just been an interesting, past 24 hours where the Prime Minister came out, he said some things, and then we had Sir Keir Starmer doing an announcement with, some music behind him, saying it can only get better. Whether Gen Z find that optimistic or cringe, I think is definitely one to investigate over the next couple of months.
Awesome. Another question come in. Can you set up, and I think by that they mean maybe potentially as a Pion, hopefully, can one set up a pulse tracker for my customers? So can we set up pulse trackers for brands, basically? I think the question is.
Yeah, definitely. That's part of what we do at Pion. So yeah, we absolutely can.
Absolutely. And Lee, just in terms of that, what does that process look like? What are our most popular trackers out there that we're currently doing?
I think it would depend on what your specific needs were. So obviously we can only see the question, but whether you're wanting a brand tracker specifically, whether you're wanting to look at brand sentiment, whether you're wanting to measure KPIs across the 12-month period, or whether you want to do something more along the lines of like attitudes and behaviors and sentiments and things like that. So it can be completely bespoke and tailored to your brand.
Great. I think this got time for one final question. Will the Gen Z that I target be different to the Gen Z other marketers are targeting? Interesting. I think, yeah.
Yeah, so that's essentially what we're covering there with the personas and with having bespoke and own trackers. For example, the Gen Z who are shopping from Adidas are going to be different from the Gen Z who are shopping at Nike, and so that's sort of what we need to understand, and that's what's going to help us, make our strategy laser focused.
Fantastic, thank you. Cool. Well, that's wrapping up the main session of this Lunch and Learn today. I very much hope you've been able to get some nuggets around how we're understanding Gen Z today. And I guess the key takeaway being it's not just a catch-all message for sure. And we have our youth marketing strategy event fast approaching in just a couple of weeks. We'll be diving deeper into the pulse and, of course, hundreds of other speakers across the 2 days. And if you'd like to join us for this event, we do have some guest tickets available for any e-commerce or retail brands that are on the call that want to join us. So do please use the code webinar to secure your ticket today for e-commerce and retail brands at a special offer with some limited tickets. Thanks for joining. I've had such a great 20-25 minutes here talking about our new pulse, and there'll be lots more to come in the next coming months and obviously year ahead. And any questions, do please drop us a line and get in touch here at Pion. We'd love to support you in any of your understanding of the landscape of Gen Z today. Have a great afternoon and thanks so much. Cheers.
Thanks so much.